Today's episode is brought to you by Achieve Unite, a global leader in leadership development, business acceleration, and trusted partnerships. Achieve Unite combines deep expertise, data analytics, and AI to help companies accelerate revenue, control costs, elevate talent, and build trust. They're more than advisors. They deliver results with their proven three-part approach: talent development, ecosystem strategy, and profitable growth programs. Whether you're strengthening alliances, enhancing internal systems, or optimizing your partner ecosystem, Achieve Unite is the partner you need for success. Are you a CX leader who's ready to get executive buy-in and measurable results? The Trusted Guide Roadmap Masterclass is back and registration is now open. We share ROI models and walk you through proven frameworks to drive successful change. But what distinguishes this course is the focus on leading change by becoming a trusted guide. Seats are limited and the next session starts February 12th. Don't wait. Visit empoweredcx.com to secure your spot today. Welcome to the Delighted Customers Podcast. I am so glad you're here. We challenge conventional thinking about customer experience because I believe that improving experiences isn't just good for business. It's a powerful way to make a meaningful difference in people's lives. Each week, we feature thought-provoking conversations with industry thought leaders from a variety of backgrounds, offering unique perspectives and actionable insights. Get ready to sharpen your leadership and transform your approach to customer experience. Let's dive in. Well, today you are all in for a treat. I am so excited to have back on my show Rob Markey. Rob is an advisory partner at Bain and Company. He's a senior lecturer now at Harvard Business School, and we're going to dig into that a little bit while we get into this conversation. He has been called the Vince Lombardi of customer loyalty, and he founded Bain's customer strategy and marketing practice. He's been published in many, many articles. He wrote an awesome book called The Ultimate Question 2.0, and I think what you'll know about Rob, and to me, he's on my Mount Rushmore because he really changed the entire game when it comes to customer experience management, working with Fred Reichheld on developing this thing called Net Promoter Score, Net Promoter System. And it has really changed the game across all industries in countries all over the world. It really can't be overstated. Now, people have done funny things with it and not used it as it was intended, but it is still arguably the number one metric to measure customer loyalty. So with that long intro, Rob, welcome to the show.
Mark, it is always such a pleasure to talk to you. I always enjoy it.
Same here, and I'm excited. We've had a couple of conversations on the podcast. You were kind enough to record something for my students at MSU, and today, and since then, you were brought in to go back to your alma mater and become a senior lecturer at HBS. And so I had to say, look, tell me about what you're doing. Let's update the audience on what's going on at Harvard and to what extent they're engaging customer experience management into their conversation as they bring up tomorrow's leaders into the world. So maybe that's a good place to start, is tell us about your role there and what you're teaching, and just give us some background on it.
Well, the funny thing is, it's a little bit of a back to, full circle moment for me, because it's a course that in its prior life I took 35 years ago. And it was part of what actually sent me down the path to working with Fred Reichheld, because in that course, we read Fred's first HBR article, which was written with Earl Sasser, who was also a professor of mine at HBS. And it was called Zero Defections, Quality Comes to Services. And it was about how this was written at a time when total quality management was all the rage. Japan was kicking the U.S.'s behind in manufacturing in general. Total quality was part of what was behind that, the concept of Kaizen. And so what Fred and Earl wrote about was the idea that one of the best metrics of failure in service businesses is the loss of a customer, the attrition or churn of a customer, and that measuring that was a very important way to keep track of the health of a business And then they further went and showed how customer retention correlates with, or better said, explains significant variations in profitability and growth. And so they demonstrated that, for example, a 5% difference in attrition rates can account for a 25 to 100% change in profitability. So I'm reading this as a student in my, what was then called service management course, and it resonated with my pre-business school experience and made me want to go seek this guy out, this Fred Reichelt dude, and see if I could figure out how to work with him. And so here I am 35 years later, and I feel like I'm, to a certain extent, paying it forward. I'm teaching the next generation a new version of this course. And it's a course that is located in HBS's Technology and Operations Management Unit, which is the group that's responsible for, as you can imagine, operations research, manufacturing, process flows, and all that stuff. And so it's meant to be a reasonably analytic approach to customer service-driven businesses. And we teach about everything from an extermination business to banking to facilities management, B2B, and, kind of everything in between. We help people who are future general managers develop a framework and structured approach to thinking about what makes for a good service operation and how you would organize a company around that.
Okay, and just to give the audience, listeners, some context, there's the classes meet how often and how large are they?
Yeah, so it's part of the MBA curriculum. It's taught in the second year. The first year at Harvard is what's called the required curriculum. Every student goes through exactly the same courses in exactly the same order all together, 900 of them, broken up into 10 or 11 sections of 90-ish each. In the second year, they have the elective curriculum, and so students can take, any group of courses they want to. This is one of the popular ones. There are about 350 students out of 900 who end up taking this each year. So there are, and they're broken up into sections. The tenured faculty member who has been teaching this for 9 years, or maybe 10 now, a guy named Ryan Buell, is a wildly successful and wildly popular tenured professor. He is outstanding. He's responsible for a lot of this curriculum, and he has 186 of those students in his sections. He won the faculty teaching, or the student teaching award last year because he's so tremendous as an instructor. I had 75 in my section, and they turned out to be 75 energetic, enthusiastic, very intelligent students who pushed me and challenged me and a little bit, struggled alongside me as I figured out how to teach in the Harvard Business School case method.
Well, and so I'm sure they feel fortunate to have had you. Could you break down, like, if I'm in your class, what are the major topics we're going to be talking about?
The course is broken up into 4 modules.
Okay.
The first module is about overall service business design. And so it really is it's the introduction of almost all the concepts that will later be elaborated through the rest of the course. And so we introduce the idea that every business makes trade-offs in the value proposition that it offers, and that those trade-offs are generally built around the needs, attitudes, behaviors of a group of target customers. We introduce the idea of what we call in the course a funding mechanism for differentiated service, a way of ensuring that you're generating enough either cost savings or excess revenue to fund differentially better service on some dimensions than on others. We introduce the concept of customer management systems. Once you get customers in the door, helping them learn how to take advantage of the business model and ensuring that they're delivered a really great experience. We teach about employee management systems, how to elevate employees to the point where they can deliver great service consistently and learn and grow. And then those are the second and third module: customer management, employee management. The fourth module is really about adapting, learning, and growing. So customer feedback as a source of growth, what to do when a market changes, technology changes, in some cases when regulations change, but how companies adapt and change or grow in the face of barriers, obstacles, challenges.
So that is rich. What do you hear from students in terms of what they like the most about the class?
So I think this is fresh on my mind because you can imagine me, I ask for feedback from the students along the way.
Yeah.
Far beyond what most other professors at HBS or probably anywhere else do. But I try to keep it simple and make it easy for them. What they consistently talked about was the relevance of the lessons, not only to service and service management, but also to other business leadership situations. Because many of the things that we do in managing service operations really pertain to manufacturing companies or even commodity industries just as much as they do to what we traditionally think about as service businesses. They talk about the extent to which the depth we go into elucidates the practical considerations that they have to take into account, and we go pretty far beyond the theory. We ground it in theory. We've clearly based on empirically derived observations and a lot of research, but we introduce a lot of practical considerations through the case method where we're illustrating real decision makers making real choices in a uncertain world. And then I think they really enjoyed, in my case, that I do bring a certain amount of experience and expertise to the table. And I think that having the option of having a professor who developed the theoretical foundation, my colleague Ryan, or having somebody who has a lot more, sort of practical experience with large companies, gave students the opportunity to kind of select their own journey. Those who joined my section tended to value that. And I'm sure that, having talked to some of the other students, the ones who joined my colleague's section also loved what he brought to the table.
Yeah. So that's so interesting. I wish it were something like, I don't know, going to see a ball game or a theater event or something where people could just buy tickets and come, but you got to get in. You got to get in to go. So, but if you're not one of those people who will probably, like me, ever go to Harvard Business School, but you're interested in knowing what happens there. So we're shining a light on that a little bit through one of the professors there. I mean, I think one of the things at Michigan State that people who come through our program really love about it is kind of what you alluded to, and it's what you bring to the table at Harvard is that most of us are practitioners or were practitioners and didn't come from academia. Nothing that there's anything wrong with that. So we have both a little bit of the theory as not that we created it, but we have it as our background and grounding. But then we also have real life stories that we can share from real customers or real organizations.
Well, I think the benefit of that combination of the academic with the practitioner, and it's very clear front and center at MSU, it's front and center in HBS. That combination does two things. One, it brings that practical reality of experience into the classroom. But the other thing it does is it makes sure that you aren't overly relying on the anecdotal. I did this thing once and here's how it worked. Therefore, this is the right way to do it. My experience, some earned the hard way, is that oftentimes we do things that are successful and we don't really understand what made them successful until we do them enough times that we fail. And what we thought accounted for their success in the beginning sometimes turns out not to be the case. And, that was one of the big lessons that led us to the development of what we now call the Net Promoter System, is a misunderstanding of why NPS, the score, had been effective in many of the cases it had been in our early experience. Not until we had failures did we know. And so what academics bring is that rigor of pulling back the lens and looking at patterns across lots and lots and lots of organizations, and frankly, a need to kind of prove it on the causality through peer-reviewed research and lots and lots and lots of reps. And in my case, teaching, and I'm sure you found this too, that had a lot of value to a lot of the dimensions of the course that I was teaching.
Yeah. Did you, when you get into the second segment of your course where you were talking about really the customer experience piece of it, do you get into Net Promoter at all?
We do. We have a couple of exercises that we have students do that are a part of this. So one is what we call the customer compatibility exercise. And there we ask students to think about the ways in which they impose variability on the companies with which they do business. Think about different forms of variability you impose on a service organization. There's arrival variability. You may have people arrive, an extreme example of it, or somewhat extreme example of it is arriving really late for a reservation at a restaurant, or arriving at closing or just after closing time. Now, the restaurant has a choice to make whether they accommodate you or not, right?
Yeah, right.
There is preference variability. It's asking for things to be prepared differently than are the way they're presented to you on the menu, or reacting differently to a dish, that everybody loves but I hate is a form of preference variability. And so what is and I'm using the restaurant example because we can all relate to it. But we ask the students to really observe how restaurants, and I say restaurants, how any service organizations deal with this sort of variability that they impose on them. And then we explore the determinants of satisfaction with an experience based on some combination of how the company decides to handle the variability in requests and how the customer evaluates those. With one of the big lessons being, an important lesson being something I've always said for like my whole career, the most important decision you make or decisions you make are around who you invite into your business system. Because your business is set up, your operation is set up to serve the needs of a certain core set of customers, whether you know it or not, whether it was explicit or intentional or not. You're better at serving some needs than others. You just are. That's the way it works.
Yeah.
And if you consistently bring customers in who don't have those needs that you're best at serving, you're going to have a really dissatisfied customer base. And just to give you an example, Ryanair actually has reasonably high NPS, not because they're a great airline objectively, but because they're really good at being clear about who they are, who they're for, and attracting customers who value that. And they even go so far as to make fun of, how bad they are at certain things. In their like Twitter, or I guess it's now called X feed, where they'll goof on the very fact that they are so horrible at certain things because they're intentionally appealing to a group of customers for whom that stuff isn't what makes them happy. What makes them happy is a low price and reliably getting them from point A to point B. That's it. So that this customer compatibility exercise is an example of like helping students get their heads around that. There's also a letter writing exercise we have them do, something I did again back in the late 80s, where we asked them to write a letter to a service organization, either praising or complaining or suggesting something, and then see what the organization brings back as a way of understanding how companies are set up to listen and learn from customer input. And then we use that as a way of talking about, for example, Net Promoter feedback and other forms of customer feedback and how to scale a listening system that has impact on how you deliver for your customers.
I'm curious now, what responses, if any, are they getting back from these companies? And by the way, are they letting them know this is part of a business school project, or are they just acting as consumers?
We leave it to them to decide whether to disclose it and how much, but we ask them in a poll we do to describe what they disclosed. We also we see the letters, but we're able to see that, for example, we jokingly call it dropping the H-bombs, saying I'm a Harvard Business School student doesn't materially change the rate at which companies respond, interestingly.
Yeah.
There are some differences, and sometimes people will do a much more thorough and thoughtful response when students do that, but sometimes they don't. So, or sometimes it has the opposite effect. We also encourage them to experiment with modes of communication. So, you submit. Do you write an email? Do you respond in detail to a customer survey? Do you send a paper letter in an envelope? How do you do it, and what kind of response? The one thing we ask they not do is use social media as their primary mode of communication because of the limitations of that for observing the actual response and frankly for providing a richness of communication to the company that reflects a student's real understanding of their business, which is part of what we're looking for, and also elicits a thoughtful response. But it is interesting and fascinating to see, and it's very different now than it was 35 years ago when I did it. Much lower response rates, a lot more automated stuff, a lot of frustratingly defensive stuff, which actually hasn't changed, I guess. There was an auto rental company that basically blamed the student for a problem that they had imposed on the student. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. You didn't do the other. It's like, wow, yeah. This is how you want to communicate with your customer.
Yeah, I love those exercises. Like, I really want to take your class, but they won't let me in.
I'll do a special Mark Slayton class.
Thank you for that. Thank you. That I'm in the special. I've always been in the special class.
There you go.
So I wanted to ask you, based on what you just shared, about these responses. It seems to me, and it seems like the trend is in this place where the responses aren't, broadly speaking now, aren't terrific. And it seems like, if I'm going to be a little bit of an optimist for a moment, I might say, seems like there's an opportunity amongst my peers if I'm a company who is willing to take a somewhat proactive approach to responding to customer feedback. I don't know, what is it? Maybe I'm thinking about it too hard, but is it low-hanging fruit?
Mark, I am always surprised at how companies fail to take advantage of gaps in their standard practice or as competitive practice, right? It is so much easier today to respond to customers at scale using Gen AI capabilities to get you started. You don't have to rely on it entirely, right? Like, I get that there are limitations and challenges, but man, you could cut into like a quarter or maybe 10% the amount of time it takes to respond to customer inbound communications at scale, and not only the amount of time, but obviously as a result, the cost. One of the things that's fascinating about this exercise is we ask the students to tell us how satisfied they are with the organization when they first send their letter. And then we ask them again afterwards when they either have or have not received a letter. Here's a shocker. It shouldn't be a shocker, but it's a shocker. The people who are the most dissatisfied are the ones who wrote letters of praise and received no response.
What a miss.
Right? They went out of their way to say, I love you because here's something that I think that you do really well, and I wish you would do more of. And oh, by the way, maybe, in some cases they say, and here's some things that I would love to see you do in addition, right? These people put real energy into this. And even though they knew it was an exercise, the students,
right,
just the act of doing it for a company they loved, it's almost like it's like saying to your loved one, I love you, and getting back dead silence.
Ghost.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
And it's funny, but it had a huge impact on their perception of the company that they were doing business with. It was its only downside.
Yeah.
Think companies are measuring that? Think they're thinking about that?
I like to pull out gems on the show, and there's a gem. I think there's two sides of that coin. One is, if you are a consumer of anything and you're either happy or upset, it'd be interesting if you actually didn't just say something to your dog or your cat about it, but you actually wrote or communicated either positive or negative, and just see what their reaction is. And then on the other side of that, if you're the company, whether you are a solopreneur or you're IBM, wow, what an opportunity we're talking about customer loyalty. Someone's saying they, in one way, showing their affection for your product or service, and you're ghosting them. And there's a huge opportunity when we talk about customer lifetime values, the length of the relationship can be extended with praise, right? I don't know what you think, but to me, that seems like an easy hit.
It's low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
That seems like a pain in the behind, and people are so tempted to focus on the negative. Like, we have to respond to every complaint. Yeah, okay. But guess what? Half the people who are complaining, they're not recoverable. I hate to say that. But the ones who love you, unrequited love, is horrible. It's horrible.
Well, Rob, we have to continue again this conversation because I could talk to you all day and we run out of time. It's been fascinating. I love hearing about your great work at Harvard and whatever's coming next. And thank you so much for being on the show today.
Really, my pleasure, Mark. And it goes both ways. The reason I'm so long-winded with you is because I enjoy talking to you and you ask great questions.
Well, same here. Rob Markey, thank you so much for being on the show.
Awesome.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Delighted Customers podcast. It would mean so much if you would take a moment to subscribe. You can go to Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts, click on the plus sign or follow button, and that will ensure that you don't miss an episode, and it helps get the word out to others. While you're there, I'd love it if you'd leave a 5-star review. I look forward to seeing you back here next Thursday.
Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience in their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's LIBSYN, ads.com today.